Hi, Sean. It's great to meet you. Just wanted to, if you could tell me a little bit about yourself and your background and where you're at right now, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to meet you as well, Grayson. I am a senior editor with Fox Sports on our editorial team. I have been in the sports media business for about 12 years now, I'd say. Graduated college from Michigan State in 2009. Um, Served in several roles before this. I started as a high school sports editor for the local Lansing newspaper out of college. Kind of got my first big break working for the Big Ten Network, where I was their web editor and social media producer over there. Did that for about 4 years. Fox actually owns the Big Ten Network, so made a lot of connections over there through some people at Fox, and kept those connections. In between Fox and Big Ten Network, I actually went to the agency side and worked for an agency named Intersport, which basically owned and operated several sports events and sports properties, working with different brands. So I was able to get some of that experience, and then have been with Fox now for about 14 months. Started right at the start of the pandemic, so extremely weird that I have actually never been in the office or met anyone on my team professionally outside of Zoom. I happened to run into one guy at ice cream one night, which was pretty funny. And it was like a huge hug and embrace because the only time I've ever seen anyone is through a screen like we're looking through right now.
Wow.
Um, but yeah, that's my story. All jobs have been in sports. I was a journalism major at Michigan State. Worked for the school newspaper while I was there. Knew I wanted to be in sports, and have kind of been able to just build my career along the way while being fortunate enough to stay in this industry and also see some different things. I've worked on the social media side. As I mentioned, I was on the agency side. And now I'm back to kind of my roots, which is on the editorial side, editing, writing. So yeah, and to be able to be with a company like Fox, which is obviously one of the largest media entities in the world, has been really neat. Certainly the largest team I've ever worked on, and with that comes more eyeballs when you're writing and editing things. So the more eyeballs you see, I think the more diligent you have to be when it comes to being an editor. But it's really neat. It's a really cool team, and it's to be able to work on things and have partnerships with Major League Baseball and the Olympics coming up, soccer, NFL, et cetera, has been really neat.
I think it was either, I think 2015, I went to the Michigan State and Stanford Rose Bowl game. And
Yes,
so
I was
I
there as well.
ingrained in my head, go green, go white. I thought it was the
There you
coolest
go.
thing. Half the stadium yells go green. So when you say Michigan State, that's always pops in the back of my head, yelling go green. I have no other connection to Michigan State because I'm a USC, grad and fan, but I know go green, somebody will respond, go white. So that was always
That's right. That's right.
so you have been at Fox Sports for 14 years now, start of the pandemic.
14 months.
14, sorry, I lied.
Yep.
Been at Fox Sports for 14 months now at the start of the pandemic. Can you go over your, responsibilities there and like what kind of you oversee or what you do?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm a senior editor on our editorial team. So a bit twofold. Number one, I produce our daily newsletter, the Fox Sports Insider newsletter, which started right before I started, actually. They built it out, they built the concept, and then they needed someone to come in and actually bring it to life. What does that consist of? That consists of figuring out, how we want it to be structured, how we get it to be the most visually appealing as well as entertaining to a reader, and really figuring out what is the value of a newsletter, what is the purpose, why does a person read a newsletter as opposed to just going to a website or app, etc. And then the second part of that is putting my agency experience to work here, which is working with different advertising partners to sell sponsorships into the newsletter to make us some money, which is fortunate because not a lot of people on our team have that experience. So to be able to come in and contribute something like that, I think has been valuable overall. And then also I oversee a lot of work that our writers do for foxsports.com and the Fox Sports app. Shortly before I started, Fox has been through a couple twists and turns when it comes to their kind of editorial team. Several years back, they went in a full pivot, as many media companies did, towards exclusive video. And that was their bread and butter. They got rid of their writers. They got rid of a ton of staff members, editors, etc. Now they see that there is, more value in that, and they began to build up their editorial team. And I was one of the fortunate enough to be, I think, the fourth member of our team overall, second or third full-time member. So it's neat kind of being in this from the ground up and being able to see, some of the cool stuff we've done. We continue to sign new writers, produce new things, a lot of working on building out our podcast networks as well. So, day to day, my kind of role pretty much consists of building that newsletter, getting that out in the morning, and then working with some writers and being kind of the final set of eyes on a lot of the written content that goes up on the website. We have a pretty decent size editorial team. I think when I started, like I said, we were at like 3 or 4, and now we're close to 20. And that includes our designers. I'd be remiss if I didn't shout that out as well. I think one of the coolest things we do is our design graphics. When you go to our app and website, those are it's incredible to think that those are done. I mean, I'll get a story at, say, 9 a.m. and by the time I'm ready to publish at 11 a.m., those graphics are done and ready to go. So to see those guys kind of churn those things out in 2 hours, and like I said, it's important to have for our articles to read right. It's also important to kind of, what engages a consumer when you go to a website, to an app, et cetera. What's the first thing you're going to see? It's the art and the headlines. So, that's equally as important. So, that's kind of my day to day, I would say. Also working with the sales team, like I said, on sponsorship opportunities surrounding some of our content. But for the most part, I am kind of, one of the several set of eyes that see a lot of our content before it goes to publish.
So Michigan State, you're a journalism major, I believe you said. How did that, prepare you for the industry?
Yeah, good question. One of the unique things that at the time I didn't question it because it just seemed normal, but now I look back on it and I'm like, why did they do this? Is that freshman, sophomore, even into maybe first semester of junior year, you were kind of taking the necessary classes that you had. And then you started to get into really like the core classes of journalism, the 300, 400, 500 level classes. And for some reason, again, now I look back and I'm not sure why, but you had to, or they wanted you to essentially pick a specialty, whether you wanted to be on the writing side, the editing side, the broadcast side, what was kind of your lane that you wanted to focus in. And I was totally torn on that. Like, I worked for the school newspaper, but I also had an internship for ABC when I was there on the sports team that I loved as well. So like, I struggled with that. And the reason I brought that up is because now I look at that and it's like, you'd be pretty hard pressed to find someone that works in TV that also doesn't have the ability to write. You'd be pretty hard pressed to find someone that's a writer, kind of, in their 20s and their 30s, that also isn't going to be asked to have some type of presence on camera, to have some presence on social media, certainly. So So it's interesting because now I look at it and that's like, why would you not want all those things? So that I kind of saw that, I guess, why they wanted you to choose one or the other. I ultimately chose print, and that's what kind of led me to my first job out of school, is that high school sports editor of the Lansing State Journal newspaper. But I took as many classes in both broadcast and print as I could, just to try to make myself as well versed as I could be going into the job force. And graduating in 2009, when I did, was right in the heart of the financial crisis, and jobs were hard to find. So I felt extremely lucky to be able to find a job in the field that I did. And, I do credit Michigan State a lot to that. They had a really good journalism program. Their teachers were really hands-on. And, once you got to those 400, 500 level classes, there was a lot of job shadowing. There was a lot of, you had to take an internship for credit. And those were the things that I found like so valuable, was kind of getting like the real life experience that they forced you to get, as opposed to kind of just, sitting in a classroom and just writing. I thought being able to talk to people in the industry, being able to job shadow, that type of thing, was invaluable. And I credit Michigan State for kind of, enforcing that within their journalism curriculum.
Gotcha. So you've been in the industry for a while. What are some key lessons you've learned from working in the sports industry?
Yeah, I think, we touched on one already, which is really to just like, to use kind of like a Wall Street quote, like diversify yourself as much as you can, like, I mean, I understand that there are people that get into sports and want to be on TV. That makes a lot of sense, but it can only help you if you're interested in being on TV, to be also be able to write, to be also be able to learn the production side, to do the dirty work and cut clips and work as an editor, work as a director, work as a producer, etc. Most people that are on TV probably started off as a PA at some point. That's my guess. And I think that's extremely valuable. One of the other things that I would say is networking. I remember when I was graduating and I was looking for a job, and I don't remember who it was exactly, but there was a quote that I remember that someone said, like, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I was like, man, that is a brutal quote. Like, I really hope that that's not true. Because at the time, being a 22-year-old senior in college, like, I didn't know a lot of people. And I wasn't, I wasn't being put in kind of positions outside of like maybe covering home games at Michigan State for the student newspaper, where I would really be in a room with like other people in the industry. And then, once social media became prominent, and LinkedIn and Twitter, etc., there became these tools that became available to be able to market yourself, but be able to market yourself in a way that wasn't, like, for lack of a better term, obnoxious. Be able to market yourself as if, hey, here I am. I'm looking to break into this industry. I'm a hard worker. I want to display my work and kind of show off my strengths, but not in a way that is like a talking head screaming, hey, I am over here. And eventually, through social media, you began to be able to market yourself. You began to be able to network. I remember there were going to networking events when I was with the Big Ten Network, and like, I love that. And going to the Big Ten football tournament or media days and being surrounded by hundreds of reporters. Like, yes, I was there to do a job for sure for the Big Ten Network, but I was also there to selfishly market myself and meet people. And kind of like I said, you have to do that in a certain way where you're not sounding desperate. You're not, you have to present yourself in a way that lets people, look at you and say, like, okay, this guy's serious. He's a hardworking individual who wants to break into this this platform wants to break into this career, and maybe my company has a job for him a year down the road. Maybe a good friend of mine in the industry has a company that's hiring, and I say, oh yeah, I remember that kid I met at Big Ten Media Days. So just networking is tremendously important in this industry. And with so many tools through social media and networking events and work events, whatever it might be, I think that, I wouldn't want to look back and say, yeah, I wanted to talk to that one reporter, but I was too shy. Like, just do it. Just do it. What do you have to lose? And go out there and present yourself in a way and have confidence.
So you mentioned it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah.
If you said that might mean, you knew somebody, you met at a networking event, you met at maybe Big Ten Media Day, something like that.
Sure.
Who did you meet? What did you do, as a graduating student or current student? They could look at you and be like, what did Sean do? So what did you do to kind of, how could they replicate that possibly?
Yeah, definitely. I think that for me, it was figuring out, it was making a list early on. And I said to myself, all right, here's 10 dream companies that I would like to work for. And then I kind of looked at it and I said, all right, you have to be realistic with yourself. You're not, and I don't mean this to say that this can't be done, but for me, I said, I'm not going to be courtside of the NBA finals being the sideline reporter at the NBA finals at 23 years old for ESPN. Like, I'm sorry, that's just not going to happen. And it took kind of a little to, come to terms with that, but it was the truth. And I was able to say myself, I said, all right, maybe that is your ultimate goal, and realize that this goal is always going to evolve. I don't want, of course you have a goal, but if you just stand still at that goal, you're going to get lost in the times, because our industry is always evolving, right? I don't think that we thought Twitter was going to be what it was 10 years ago. The industry is always evolving, and there's always new things coming up. So for me, it was kind of meeting those people that could ultimately help me kind of build on those stepping stones to get to that point that I wanted to be at. I think one of the turning points was that after that job with the Lansing State Journal, I went in and I was able to set up an informal interview with the head of digital at the Big Ten Network. Michael Calderon was his name. And I remember sitting there talking to him, and we had a great conversation. At the end, he said, this is, I am very impressed with everything we've talked about. I think that you would be a great fit here. We just don't have anything open right now. And that wasn't the first time I'd ever heard that. That's not the first time. Someone will probably hear that at one point in this industry. I guarantee it. Yeah. If you don't, you're a miracle, because that is a common term that you will hear. But then I thought to myself, gosh, I really want to work at this place. I love college sports. I went to a Big Ten university. I love writing. They have a website and app that's growing. How can I get here? And my wife at the time set me up with an interview with the head of HR. And she said, this is not at all what you probably want to do, but if you want to get your foot in here, we are looking for a temporary receptionist. And I said, whoa, I never thought I would do that. I never thought that would be my job title, but I want to work here, and I know that I'm going to be the first face that people are going to see when they walk in here, and what better way to be able to meet people. So I did it, and I did that for about probably 6 to 9 months. And I'd be lying if I said after month 2, I wasn't like, all right, when's this digital team going to have an open position come around? Like, how much longer? But I put in my time, and eventually, I remember we had a company all meeting, and I was talking to an editor on the digital team, and he said, well, even if we don't have a position, why don't you just try to think of a story concept, something that we can run maybe weekly and test it out, you know? And I was like, well, I always been interested in what, you know, what former Big Ten athletes are doing now that didn't make it to the pros. So what about like a Where Are They Now series? And he's like, if you can come to me once a week with a Where Are They Now story that I think people will want to read, we'll publish it. So I did it, and it was like, it became something that I attached myself to, and kind of became that thing that was needed to push them to say, all right, like this kid knows what he's doing. He's passionate about it. He does have some writing skills. You know, let's think of a position for him. Let's figure out a way to get to him on our team. And then after, like I said, about 9 months, a position open for a web editor at their company, at the Big Ten Network. And from there on out, kind of set the stage for, you know, really kind of the breakthrough that I needed to get in this industry on more of like a national level. And that was a huge breakthrough. So I credit the head of HR, my wife, for getting me that meeting with her, and Michael Calderon, who I mentioned, for taking that initial meeting with me. But it was taking a risk and doing something that I never thought I would do. And quite frankly, I didn't want to do, but I did it knowing that it could lead to something bigger.
One of the hardest lessons I learned was after graduating, both realizing that I will be told numerous times that there's just not a spot for you.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to think like, okay, there's so many jobs here, there's not one for me. And also that I did set my sights way too high. I had to kind of come ground myself. Is like, you need to figure out the reality is that you're not going to be, like you said, the silent reporter. You're not. Right, so you need to work your way up to there, and I think you nailed it. You were a receptionist, a temporary receptionist, and now you know you said you never thought you had that title, but here you are now. So to me, it's just you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, then that's one of the hardest parts, is just like you said, like grounding yourself. I mean, you know, if if you work in sports, I would also guarantee that at some point when you were really younger, you probably thought you were going to be a professional athlete. Who didn't? Yeah, everyone did. And I think back to that. Think back to my dad telling me when I was like 8 years old, like, "Hey, Sean, like you aren't going to play in the NBA. Like, sorry." And I'll always remember that conversation. That came back when you know you have to ground yourself eventually. And that's not to say that there aren't people that do it. There are people that certainly work their way up very, very quickly. But you know, more times than not, you got to pay your dues, and you have to, it takes a little luck. It takes a little luck, and it takes, it all goes back to that kind of sentence that I said initially, like, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Like, as much as that scared the crap out of me when I heard it, there's a lot of truth to it. But the cool thing about it is that, you know, with the way that things are now in this day and age, and how many lanes of communication we have, we truly do have the ability to meet a lot of people and to know a lot of people. And that helps in this industry. Definitely.
So final question, you know, we're going a little over the 15-minute mark here, but I think, you know, all this is very helpful to people that are trying to get into the industry. What advice do you have for the students and young professionals that are trying to work into sports, or that are currently working in sports?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that we probably went over some things that certainly will kind of overlay on this, and serve as that advice. And that is, you know, number one, I can't express enough how important networking is, in the industry. It's extremely valuable. Number two, I think important is to, you know, kind of, we talked about making that list and figuring out where you ultimately want to be, and making a path of how you want to get to that point, with the full understanding that that path, that ultimate goal, and everything will be always evolving. Keeping up with trends in this industry is so vitally important. And don't be afraid, and I encourage people to set up meetings, whether that's doing exactly what we're doing right now, whether that's grabbing coffee with someone, whether that's when you're working for your student newspaper and covering an event, to talk to the reporter that's there covering that event. If it's a big game, seek out a national reporter that's there covering that event and ask them if they want to have 15 minutes to grab a coffee. Being able to do that and kind of put a face behind a name in this industry is so important, because if it's not that person that's going to have an open job at their company, they're going to know someone. I mean, once you get into this industry and get deep into it, it's almost like a fraternity where, like, you know, almost everyone in this industry, and people will ask me from time to time, like, hey, I got this position open, do you know anyone that would be good for it? And I think that when I was younger in the industry, I would think to myself and think like, oh yeah, I know this guy that does design, he'd be great. But now I give it a lot of thought, but like I can say, oh yeah, I remember meeting so-and-so for coffee when I was covering an event. He would be a good fit. You should talk to him. That's networking 101, and it's so vitally important. And then the third thing I would just say is, you know, applying to a job is a lot more than uploading your resume, your cover letter and clicking submit. There is a precise there's a precise way to go about following up with people after you've hit submit, after you apply, connecting with people through the tools that we have through LinkedIn, and thinking to yourself when you're filling out that cover letter, when you're filling out that resume, gosh, I'm applying to be a college football writer at ESPN. How many other people your age are applying to this job? How many other people that have the exact same amount of experience are applying to this job? So think to yourself, you know, what can I do that makes me stand out? What can I do that makes me really pop? And don't be afraid to ask people in the industry that exact question. Because, you know, like I said, like my wife working in HR, I'm extremely blessed to be able to like see some of the conversations she has with people and be able to see like, hear like how many resumes people get in a day, in a week, whatever it is. And what really makes, you know, individuals stand out, and put yourself in a consumer's shoes, put yourself in the shoes of someone that's interviewing for this position and say, you know, what would I want to see? What would really make me catch my eye and say, oh, this looks like a good candidate. He or she is different. I think that's extremely important.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to end the recording right here.